Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Pruden and I'm very much looking forward to spending the next 10 minutes with you to talk about how to build a true wellbeing culture in your organisation. So the purpose of this 10-minute session is to essentially suggest some ways that we can initially check in with ourselves in terms of what we've been doing so far regarding our school's approach to mental health and wellbeing, but ultimately to ask ourselves two questions. Are we authentic in terms of this approach? And in order to make our approach more sustainable, what are the next steps? What next for our schools in terms of creating a true wellbeing culture? It's always a good idea to take a moment to step back and think about how we approach wellbeing and mental health in schools. Now, we may feel pretty confident that we've been doing really well, and that's great. But one of the first questions I would like you to ask yourself is, who in our school are our ambassadors? Now, it may be that they're people that have shown a keen interest in wellbeing and mental health and have offered support. It may be that it's more down to the job role in terms of perhaps pastoral leadership. But the thing that I want to ask you more is, who are our ambassadors that are in the room when we are making important strategic decisions and in fact important operational decisions? Because every time those types of decisions are made, there will be an impact on the well-being of students and staff. So every time we're having those table discussions, who's there to check that we are coming at it from the right perspective, and who's there to check that we are always taking into consideration the well-being of our staff and the well-being of our students. The second question is, as leaders, do we always role model? And of course we may do that in so many ways, but when it comes to demonstrating the importance of our own mental health and well-being, do we show ourselves as human beings? There's a concept that leaders have to be seen to be strong all the time, but actually it's important that sometimes we show that humanity and give that validation to the people that we work with and the young people that we care about, to say it's okay to feel this way, and sometimes we all struggle. The third question is, ask yourself this real hard question: do we plan strategically when it comes to well-being, or are we making our decisions based on reactions and based on what's out there? The reason that I think that our responses to global sustainability is a really accurate analogy as to how we approach well-being in our organisations is because actually the task seems really quite overwhelming, especially during the past year when we've been dealing with a global pandemic. We absolutely want to respond quickly and support our staff and students as effectively as we possibly can. The reality is, if we want this to last long term, not only do we have to think about some short-term measures, some things that we can do quickly, we really have to think about those things that are going to make a difference in the months and years to come. So whilst it's great that, for example, some corporations have chosen to adapt their menus to make sure that they're no longer serving plastic straws, that's great in the moment and in terms of a response to society and what it's requesting. But in reality, they need to be looking at their organisations and thinking, right, what can we do daily? How can we behave differently to ensure that we are doing what's right for our planet? And in terms of well-being, that is the exact approach that we need to take. What about our behaviours day to day? What about the way that we treat each other and the way that we model behaviour? That means that we can truly say that we have got a well-being culture. Working within schools and across a multi-academy trust, it's been absolutely right and appropriate that wellbeing has been on the agenda for the last couple of years, to say the least. However, because of the recent pandemic, wellbeing and mental health issues have been catapulted into the limelight. And as a result of that, schools who don't have a solid foundation when it comes to this approach have found it very difficult to know how to respond in the most impactful way to staff and students. The intent has absolutely been there, of course, but in terms of the impact, that's harder when it's built on slightly confusing foundations. As you can imagine, and as I'm sure you've all experienced, there's been a huge range of resources out there and available to us. And what there tends to be often in cases like that is that organisations are sending out lots of different alternatives to staff and students, when actually the sheer notion that people are struggling with their mental health and their well-being means that they're not in a position to cut through that noise and access things that are really useful to them. It is far better that there is a pause and schools look and say, right, what are our key messages that we want to get through? What are our core behaviours that we want to make sure that we are delivering to our staff and to our students? Being consistent is far more important than giving a huge range of options. The reality is that staff want to feel that they have got something they can rely on day to day, rather than something that's sent out as an option in an email once a week or maybe once a fortnight. The key thing though really is about humanity. Do we feel that the people around us empathise with our position? Now, that's coming from a student's perspective and that's coming from a member of staff's perspective. Remember, empathy is not about somebody giving you a solution. Empathy is about hearing you, validating how you feel, and being there for you until you start to move towards a better way of feeling. Building in well-being into your school's strategic plan is the absolute key to make sure that it is embedded in the culture and the behaviours of the organisation. Well-being is a word, and it can be cut and paste almost into any document. The reality is it's not a word, it's a way of being. And so what you want to have on your strategic plan is clear key performance indicators and lots of what does this look like, to be absolutely sure you know when you're being successful in terms of well-being. Linking back to our sustainability analogy again, the world is constantly changing. And just like the world, mental health and well-being is a dynamic notion. It changes daily. I mean, when we think about our own emotions, and certainly at the moment, it can be the case that they can change within an hour. And that's the same within an organisation, moving through the week, moving through the month, moving through the year. So it's really important that we are never complacent. It's really important that we don't use very simple evaluation terms in terms of measuring our impact. What we really need to do is put an absolute emphasis on student voice, staff voice, and parent surveys in terms of really engaging with our stakeholders. How are we doing? And there really needs to be a foundation of trust when it comes to those types of evaluations. So I highly recommend, when you do any form of survey with any stakeholder, make sure that you feed back to them in terms of you said, we did. And that continues to build trust, and that continues to build that kind of self-managing element of a true wellbeing culture. Okay, so what next? Of course, it's absolutely important that schools have clear policies on mental health and wellbeing for all staff and students. But these can't simply be impressive pieces of paper. These documents have to be clear, they have to be human, but most importantly, they need to live. What can be a really good idea is to release and agree a core statement in terms of your school's approach, and with staff and students agree core behaviours in terms of what this looks like day to day. Remember the importance of threading it through every single layer of strategic planning. Who are our ambassadors at each level? In terms of governance and at trust level, specific specialists, or in fact committees, completely responsible for looking at the evidence in terms of the impact of your approach on wellbeing is essential. The evidence will be everywhere, especially if it's embedded into the day-to-day behaviours of the school. So ask yourself, do we hold each other to account against the statements we've agreed in our charter or in our set of non-negotiables? Do we keep conversations open and honest? As leaders, are we modelling the behaviours that we're recommending? In terms of our curriculum, Does our curriculum allow for opportunities to talk about mental health across the board, not just specifically in ring-fenced areas like PSHE and tutorial programs? Remember, being proactive takes the negativity away from this area. One word literally has the word health in it, and the other has the word well in it. Let's not forget that if we have a true wellbeing culture, we are encouraging positive and healthy mindsets, not simply reacting to the situation that we find ourselves in. Thank you so much for taking the last 10 minutes to listen to this presentation. I genuinely appreciate it, and I do hope that you enjoy the rest of your sessions today. Thank you.